Cool, so now we are moving past addition and subtraction. We are going to start multiplying. I have two complex numbers here. This has two parts. Remember, complex numbers have a real and an imaginary. Over here, it's a real and an imaginary. And so when we multiply, it's a little more complicated. We have to FOIL. I recommend that you use the box. And so I take this one right here, I write 1 plus 3i on top of the box. Then down the side I'm going to have a 2 row, and then since this is minus I, I'm going to have a minus I row. And so all I have to do is multiply and put my answers in the box. It organizes it for me, it's a lot easier. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 3i is 6i. 1 times negative I, that would be negative 1i, or just negative I. And here it's kind of tricky. I would say negative times 3 would be a negative 3, but I times I, it's like any other variable, that would be I squared. So if I wrote these out, it would be 2 plus, now I'm going to combine my i's here. I have 6i and minus 1i, that would be 5i, and here I have minus 3i squared. Now before this happens, where we had an I squared, and remember that I squared is going to be negative 1. So instead of an I squared here, this would be negative 3 times negative 1. And so what happens here is this actually turns into a plus 3. So I still have the 2 plus 5i going on, but this whole thing boils down to plus 3. Now I have two real numbers that I can just add together. 2 plus 3 is 5. So it would be, my answer would be 5 plus 5i. That's my answer. Okay, so we're going to do one more example because sometimes we don't have to FOIL out like that. For instance, if I had 2i and I need to do that times 1 plus 7i, it's actually a lot easier. Back up here we had two things times two things, so we had to do this box. Here we have one thing times two things. And this is just the plain old distribute. So 2i times 1 is just 2i. 2i times 7i, well 2 times 7 is 14. I times I is I squared. And I'll keep the plus sign between them. Alright, again though, we have an I squared, and if you remember, I squared is always negative 1. So I could think of that, or I should think of that, as 14 and a negative 1 right next to it. So that's going to turn into negative 14, and this is going to be 2i. It will be negative 14 plus 2i.